Notre Dame stayed quiet while the rest of the college football world went wild at the start of the transfer portal, but now that the dust has settled, the Irish came out looking like one of the biggest winners. Coming up, we're breaking down how it happened and what it means on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in to Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak, Notre Dame alum and Fox Sports producer, and thanks as always for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. And before we get rolling here, please take a second to make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. For those of you watching on YouTube, you might notice that we've got a new look here on the show today. I got a new camera, and I can't lie, it's pretty badass, but I'll admit we have got some work to do on the backdrop. Right now, it kind of looks like I'm in solitary confinement or something like that, so I'm going to have to redecorate a little bit. We will get there. But on today's show, we're diving deep into Notre Dame's transfer portal class now that the window to enter has officially closed. Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated is going to join me in just a moment to do so, and we're going to break down Notre Dame's patient approach to the portal and why the Irish waited while other programs rushed to add players, and it ultimately paid off for the Irish in the end. We'll also get into which portal edition will make the biggest immediate impact, who might be flying under the radar a little bit, and whether this portal cycle represents a real shift in how Notre Dame builds its roster moving forward. Let's get into it. All right, I'm joined now by a great friend of the show, Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated. And Eric, now that the window to enter the transfer portal is officially closed, but players who are in the portal without a team can still pick a school, do you believe Notre Dame is done adding players, or is there still room for more moves?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So this weekend, I was actually down in Miami speaking with a number of my colleagues during the opening, the Battle 7-on-7 events, and one topic that came up consistently with roster building is designated student athletes. And these are the guys who are, obviously it's not public information, but they have basically been given this DSA tag, so they are not outright cut as the roster limit gets trimmed down. Every team is able to designate a few of them, and if you transfer, you keep that tag. So they don't count against your actual roster limit. This was a huge topic of conversation down there. A lot of schools this in the portal process are really hunting for guys with that DSA tag so they can add, even if it's just like previously 3-star talent, your traditional preferred walk-on types, right? Guys who are not counting against your overall roster limit and add there. I think there's room for Notre Dame to add some of those guys. I mean, they didn't get a running back in the portal. There's been talk about them maybe trying to get like an experienced swing lineman, not to start, but just to add veteran depth. So there's been a few conversations on that side of things. I would not be surprised if Notre Dame goes out and gets, a handful, no more than half dozen, like designated student athletes to just fill in spots in the roster because they are free spots. And there's a few areas where they could probably use the functional depth. That said, as far as impact players, guys I would anticipate are going to come in and actually help the 2026 season, I think they're done.
So when you step back and look at this entire portal cycle for Notre Dame, what's the biggest headline for you in terms of their approach and results?
I think the biggest thing is what Marcus Freeman said. Actually, it was Mike Martin's quote to him, but what he said in his press conference, that they ran their own race. And I think that's a very accurate sort of assessment of how Notre Dame took this. Obviously, there was some issues at the beginning, and I don't want to downplay that because obviously there was high cost. There was ticket shock a little bit with some of the early targets, Nick Marsh to Indiana and the corner to USC, who's now escaping my brain. But
Jontes Williams.
Yes. So there was a couple things like that where the bidding got high, but at the same time, Notre Dame was kind of caught looking in the first weekend, and they had a rough start, and they wanted these guys. They were the top targets, and they had to shift. What I think is really commendable for this portal effort and class is, one, how they were able to pivot and find these top targets and really kind of play the waiting game of okay, we've seen a lot of our competitors pay top dollar for guys, some of whom we don't even want. Let's go get some real talents, and we're going to be able to get them at a slightly lower, more approachable price, and we're probably going to have a more limited negotiating window, not timeline, but less teams are going to be calling and engaged because they've already set some of their budget aside. So I thought it was a very crafty period from Notre Dame, despite the initial issues. Obviously, some of that stuff was in motion before the announcements. Like the timeline is tough when you have to go through the financial aid process and how Notre Dame gets guys in. So it wasn't quite as elongated as it seemed publicly, but I thought they did a great job pivoting. And I think when I look at like what's the big takeaway from how they approach this, it's very difficult to keep track of what is going on in the world. The rules change seemingly every week. The windows keep changing. The rules and permissibility of how you can write your contracts change. So it's a really weird time, and it's very easy to kind of get caught out if other people adjust better than you do and you didn't really anticipate needing to adjust. And I think for what would rightfully be called a rough, probably 48, 72 hours to kick this thing off, maybe even 4 days, I think Notre Dame did a really good job of pivoting from that point and understanding here's how we can move this thing forward and get guys in who are not only going to provide value for this season, but ultimately are going to help build the roster in 27 and 28 as well.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me, and it's not necessarily just specific to Notre Dame, was how many more talented players entered the portal after the first weekend. Like you would think that all these best guys would come in the first weekend. That certainly was the case for some players. A lot of the quarterbacks were in early, obviously a guy like Nick Marsh and Jontez Williams. So those are two of the guys that Notre Dame was looking at early, but then, most of the guys they got didn't enter until much later. So it's interesting just kind of how that timeline works. Like you look at the guys that Notre Dame had for their first round of visits, like Atkinson, the quarterback from Mercer, Jalen Thompson, the defensive end from Michigan State, Xavier Townsend, the wide receiver from Iowa State. Like, would you compare the guys who visited Notre Dame early on to the players that they actually landed? There is a huge difference in terms of talent. I just think it's interesting how it all played out like that.
Yeah, that gulf is fascinating because obviously those visits are almost like what's the best available market that we understand or fits here. And you saw the goalpost kind of move there as better talent entered the portal. And, they looked at some of these guys like, look, we liked you at the first bit, but we got Keon Keeley coming to town. Sorry, Jalen Thompson. Like some of these things just sort of develop, like you said. So it's kind of fascinating to see where the board was at the start and kind of how it evolved because it's just such a one. It's also fast, right? It's like you see these guys coming to town. You're like, okay, the portal's moving so fast. They're going to commit, right? They're coming to town. And then they just didn't. They didn't get any of those first run guys by choice. So it's just once again, it's kind of a testament to the patience there that they saw these targets, they evaluated, they got them on campus, they kept the options open, and they said, you know what, we can do better. And they did. To be able to stick that landing is pretty impressive for me.
Right. And there was obviously a lot of anxiety early on when Notre Dame stayed quiet. And honestly, judging from Marcus Freeman's press conference, I think even he was a little bit anxious. He even admitted it in so many words. But Mike Martin, the general manager at Notre Dame, stayed steady throughout that entire process. And now that they were able to get the 8 guys they got, very talented, they fulfill pretty much all of their biggest needs. I feel like it was a job well done by Mike Martin. But how do you think Notre Dame is going to change their approach for future cycles? Do you think they're going to try to be as patient as they were this year? I mean, I would expect they're going to have visitors on campus a little bit earlier next time around. But I think that this patient style is going to be how they go forward here.
Yeah, I think so too. I do think they will try to get visitors on campus in the earlier part, just if nothing else, to kind of, if there's a guy they really want, like Nick Marsh, they can kind of box out competition and maybe they get a more favorable offer than they would have, kind of like Indiana probably got a more favorable offer than if they had let him leave campus. So I do think they'll try and get a little bit more aggressive with the scheduling. But that said, there was a real tactical element to that sort of second wave of patience. Like Notre Dame understood that there was going to be a lot of bidding out front. They understood the money was going to be crazy. And that if there was a second wave, as they anticipated with the one portal window, as guys kind of assessed their situations and saw stuff, they showed that they can still find wins there. Now, I think the question is, as the rules change and everything, are we always going to see that strong of a second wind? I would think moving forward, that would probably still be somewhat consistent just with one portal window. You got, changing situations for these guys all over the country. You have a lot of coaching movement in this period as well. So it's a very different dynamic. But I think Notre Dame feels comfortable in that space where they don't have to go out right at the beginning and just bid, and throw money. They can kind of get a better sense of like, okay, you've committed funds. These teams are all looking at guys that, we want at positions we want, but now there's these guys entering that we like and they don't have the budget for it. And Notre Dame is very, very aware of the fact that they can, like, they're funded well enough to throw money around when they really feel motivated to do so. They don't necessarily want to be the team overpaying for 1 to 2 to 3 guys. They want to be filling out the portal class to fit their needs and just paying enough to lock in, get those guys. So patience rewards teams that want to be smart with how they invest, as opposed to teams that are maybe a bit antsy and just throwing money like, we need him, we need him, we need him.
Yeah.
I think Notre Dame can avoid those pitfalls.
Before Eric and I do a deep dive into all the players Notre Dame added in the transfer portal, including who we believe will make the biggest impact early on, I wanted to remind you to check out our new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Irish. Same show, same schedule, just no ads. And it works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it's a really easy upgrade. Go to lockedonirish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. Ride with the favorite when you think a team controls the matchup, or you can take a shot on the underdog if you feel an upset coming. And if you're really feeling confident, you can go all in and build a parlay around the players and moments you think will decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. So here we go. National championship tonight, Miami, Indiana. You have a college football playoff profit boost waiting for you. And look, I understand it's going to be a hate watch for a lot of you Notre Dame fans. I don't think anyone is really excited about the prospect of Miami winning it or Indiana winning it, but you know what? At least you can make some money off of it, okay? So FanDuel is the best place to get in the action all playoff long. Visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. Let's dive into the specifics here. How close did Notre Dame actually come to landing former Ohio State wide receivers Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter out of high school? Because it seems like those previous relationships really helped bring them back around through the portal.
Yeah, I know Mylan was closer, at least from memory. Both of those guys were kind of a little bit further back, or at least Mylan was, but he was closer, seriously considered Notre Dame. I know he was on campus for Irish Invasion. I think Quincy Porter got on campus for Irish Invasion at one point as well. I know he came on at least one visit. Notre Dame wasn't as seriously involved in the Porter race. That was like a lot of Ohio State, Michigan in high school, but he had a lot of ties to the Midwest. I know there was some mutual interest at some point in his process. I believe Notre Dame was, if not a finalist, they were in like one of his cut lists for Mylan Graham. Like they were pretty close there. And ultimately, both of those guys are fits for what Notre Dame wanted, right? I think honestly, the biggest thing that probably hurt the Quincy Porter pursuit in high school was just how committed Notre Dame was to fighting it out for Derek Meadows, who would have fit a similar niche. That was probably an opportunity cost to go that route. Whereas with Mylan, I really think at the end of the day, like it was just so tough to beat Brian Hartline for those guys that even though Notre Dame put a good foot forward and recruited the hell out of that kid, like it's tough to beat Brian Hartline when he's at Ohio State. So thank the Lord he's at USF, man.
Seriously. And I wondered, as soon as I heard that news that Hartline was going to become the head coach at USF, I was like, man, I wonder how much that's going to hurt Ohio State recruiting. I guess I did not think as much about how it could impact the wide receivers currently in that room and who would end up entering the transfer portal. Turns out Notre Dame lands 2 guys from that same wide receiver room. Do you have a preference between Graham or Porter? Who do you think is going to be better?
I think Porter probably fits like the need for Notre Dame more, right? Boundary is such a unique position, and getting those one-on-one matchups, especially with a quarterback like CJ Carr, like if he maximizes his potential, he'll be the better of the two. However, I love Mylan Graham, dude. Like his high school tape is so good, and like he's explosive, he's fun, he's great after the catch. He's kind of like that modern style of wide receiver that we think of where it's like you don't have to be a boundary big guy to be a number one. You can be a field receiver who just gets open and makes big plays, and you can be a number one. And he's kind of that style of guy. He's like this new age wide receiver where separation is king and yards after catch is king. That's what he excels at. So I get really excited about the idea of him in this offense, along with guys like Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse, just kind of filling out that side and having that kind of playmaking ability after the catch with all 3 of those guys that they've demonstrated with a big body guy like Porter. I mean, I think they're all going to help each other a little bit, but ultimately I think I'm probably a little higher on Mylan, just personal preference. I was obsessed with this tape.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I really like Mylan Graham, although I admit the fact that he did not get that much playing time, even after Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate went down late in the year for Ohio State, is a little bit concerning. Like, Ohio State fans were quick to point that out. I think, new place, clean slate. I think Mylan Graham is set up to succeed in a big way at Notre Dame. And it's kind of funny. Like, I'm so enamored by Mylan Graham. I'm almost forgetting that Notre Dame just signed a guy who is literally a top 30 player in the country in the previous recruiting class. But, with his injury and sort of the uncertainty there around Porter, I mean, I still think he could end up being a great player. I'm just a little bit more excited about Mylan Graham at this point in time. But out of everyone Notre Dame has added, who do you think has the best chance to make the biggest impact right away this season?
It feels like cheating to say Spencer Porath or Porth. So I'm going to go. I'm kind of in my head. I'm thinking of the two defensive tackles. I'm going to go with Brew just because I think he has more 3-down utility than Gray does. Gray is obviously a first 2 down. Like, I think he's going to be a menace on the first 2 downs. It's just once you get to third down, it's like, okay, you probably got to take him off the field. So I think Brew is probably the best immediate impact guy that they signed out of that portal group. He fits a need. He's got pass rushing utility. He's built thick. Like, he's got room to grow as a player to be a little bit more productive, but he's so quick off the line. Like, he is very rarely the second guy to move. He's usually number one, first guy off the snap. Like, it is just unreal to watch how quick he is off the line. And when you pair that with some of the coaching that's coming in with Coach Partridge and obviously a very, very good group of defensive ends around him, I think that lends itself well to him being a very big impact player and him being able to accentuate that unit in a way that we really haven't seen probably in 2 years, 2-3 years from someone on the inside.
I'm with you. I think it's Brew because he's definitely going to start day one, and he plays a position that Notre Dame desperately needed help at. So I think he's going to come in and make a big impact right away this season. But Notre Dame chose not to take a quarterback, tight end, or running back in the portal. Do you agree with that approach? And what does it say about how confident they are in the guys in those rooms?
Yeah, I would say tight end is probably the most confusing one to me, just because it seemed like there was, sorry about the cap, it seemed like there was a legitimate need there, and obviously Foley is a high-quality guy. I think that ultimately the flip side of that is, like, if they take another tight end, it probably means the end of Jack Larson's Notre Dame career, and I don't know that he wants that to end. So I can understand, like, logistically why this happened, but I do think that ultimately the law firm of Flanagan, Foley, and Premer would have been awesome, and that would have really helped them out. Quarterback, I'm a little bit less worried about with Teddy Gerard reclassifying. I do think that they have, between the 3 young guys, they'll have a somewhat good backup for this year. And obviously an experience, so I say somewhat. But I think they'll have a serviceable backup to CJ Carr between one of those 3 guys. Now, is he going to be a title winner? Probably not. But I do think you can spot start, if you need someone to come in and just deliver a good ball, there's a couple guys in there that can do that. I do think ultimately, though, if they can find a quarterback option who's comfortable with not pushing to be a starter, but just has experience, who fits that designated student athlete tag, I do think that's something that's probably worth pursuing. It doesn't count against your roster limit, and it's someone who could, in a real pinch, just come in and be like, hey, I've been in this situation before. Maybe it was a D2, but I've been in this situation before. I know what the pressure feels like. I know what this works at. Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking on the quarterback side. Running back, that one I keep going back and forth on. You can probably see the gears turning in my head because I really like Aeneas Williams. And I keep going back to a point I think Tim O'Malley made on a podcast recently where he's like, I'd be really comfortable if he's your 1B. And I think that's probably a really good point. And like, I'm not sure who the 1A would be. Like, I had a lot of faith in Keedron Young, but there are health questions there that you got to answer. I love Javian Osborne's tape as a pure runner, but he's a freshman who's never played. Jonas Walton's never played. Obviously, Nolan James is someone that they really like, but he is still pretty small, so that's going to depend on how he can do in the weight room. So it's not that I doubt that they have the talent for Aeneas plus whoever to be a really dynamic, one of the best groups in the country, but there's just no proof in the pudding. And you got to find something there. So again, if they can find like a DSA take at running back, I think that's probably a valuable add for them. I keep going back and forth on this group because I'm not really sure what to expect from some of these guys after Aeneas Williams. He's going to be a great utility player. He's going to be able to handle 3 downs of work. He's going to be able to do everything that they task running backs to do at a high level. But do they have an elite running back to pair with him, just like between the tackle dominant playmaker? I don't know. That's a bit of a question. So that one, you can see, I kind of go back and forth on. I don't quite know how to make that one yet.
I wish they took a quarterback. It'd be nice if they could figure out whatever Oregon's got going on and how they're able to convince these guys who've already started somewhere to basically take the year off. Yeah. They've obviously got it figured out. I mean, say what you want about Dylan Raiola, but if he's your backup quarterback, you're feeling pretty good about your quarterback room. So I always understood that was going to be difficult for Notre Dame to do. They didn't get that done. And then, you're going to be leaning on potentially Teddy Gerard, who should technically be a senior in high school, or Noah Grubbs, because I think you and I are both in agreement here that Blake Hebert is not going to be the backup quarterback. And then at tight end, I liked Foley. I thought he was basically a lock. And then, things changed at the 11th hour. He doesn't even make his visit to Notre Dame. He ends up at Louisville. But look, if Foley's asking for 7 figures and maybe even more than that, and they don't think he's worth it, then, maybe this is going to be a big step forward for James Flanagan. I like the law firm of Flanagan and Flanagan. And then at running back, I always felt like you either have to get a Hollywood Smothers or Justice Haynes type. Like, you need a big time player that is going to come in and be an impact player on day one. Because if you're just taking a guy who's young, hasn't really produced that much in college, it's like you already have a bunch of those guys in the room, so why not just lean on them,
Yeah, and I thought the Haynes thing was interesting because going from Michigan to Georgia Tech, clearly there's an academic fit there, right? Those are 2 great schools, and I think that the academic side lined up, there's money involved and there's other questions, but the fact that Notre Dame was never really tied to Haynes, it doesn't seem like they made any sort of effort to really, reel him in. That was telling to me, because if you want to look at moving the offense from last year with Jeremiah Love into this year and having anything resembling, the dynamicism of him and Price in that backfield, it was Haynes. He was the best guy on the portal for that. And they didn't really go after him. So I don't know if that's a cost question. I don't know if there was other issues about fit, but that one felt like a little bit of a signal to me. Like, okay, if they're not even making phone calls here that are getting connected publicly and we're not hearing about it, like, that tells me that this is not something that they're really pushing down the track, so that they feel a lot of urgency for, which, if they have the guys that they think they do and they believe in these guys, maybe that works out fine. But to me, that was a little bit of like okay.
Yeah, I thought they would go after Hollywood Smothers too. He definitely fits the mold of what Notre Dame likes to do, take a really talented player from an ACC team that they played that season. But it didn't seem like they were super interested in him either. But if you look at this class as a whole and you had to define the strength of this class in one area, whether it's talent level, versatility, long-term upside now because they have a bunch of undergraduate transfers, what stands out the most to you?
Long-term upside's definitely up there. Variation of skill sets is definitely one that stands out to me too. Like Gray, your defensive lineman, you got your run clogger, your 2-down guy, and then obviously you have Brew on the other side who gets pass rushing utility. You have a strong side defensive end who can pair well with Boubacar Traore, who can push Bryce Young inside to pass rush, whatever it's going to work out to with Keon Keeley. Like, I really appreciate the versatility there. Obviously, on the wide receiver side, you have a boundary and then you have a field. So you kind of covered off 2 different things with multiple years of eligibility. So if, someone else were to leave after the season, like Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse, you kind of have that next guy in to take that up. And the defensive backs are interesting to me too, because they're outside guys, at least historically. Now, obviously, between the 2 of them and someone in the room now, they're going to have somebody playing nickel. But there's real talent in there. There is significant upside, especially in the Michigan corner. I really like the upside there. That was a little bit confusing in real time, but hearing Marcus Freeman talk about it and it kind of bringing it signing where he was like, yeah, we're recruiting a ton of guys at these positions because we know we're going to play nickel. We're going to even play some dime. Like, we need to have bodies. I thought that gave them a lot of variation, and ultimately it gave them real competition to push Christian Gray, who is very good most of the time, but then obviously when he's not, it is rough. So it gives them someone to, maybe when he's on a down day, someone to put in or someone to push him in practice. Like, I think that ultimately is going to make that group better than just having Leonard Moore dominate over it and kind of everybody else fighting for that number 2 spot.
Eric and I still have a lot more to get to, including some of his insight from being at one of the most prestigious high school recruiting camps in the country over the weekend. But before we get to that, a word from TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It is a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Now that they were able to add Keon Keeley, Francis Brew, and Tion Gray, how different does this whole defensive line look compared to where it was at the end of this past season? Would you say that they're better, worse, or about the same?
It's a good one. They're definitely bigger. I think they're probably better. Last year, I think the defensive line was good. It maybe even outperformed some of my concerns about that unit throughout the course of the year. If they get Onye back, which I have my doubts about, but if they do get him back, I think this group will be better than next year because you definitely have more size. You have better pass rushing utility from the inside, and you have a freaking monster in the middle for the first two downs. And then when you look at Keon Keeley, like I recognize he didn't produce at Alabama the way you'd like, some upshot in the last, but caveat with him is two things. One, coming out of high school, everyone knew there needed to be a plan to make sure he stayed focused, locked in, and like kind of moving this thing down. And Notre Dame has that in place, same way they would have if he had come out of high school. And two, Keon Keeley basically wasted his freshman year playing outside linebacker. I don't know why they did that. Regardless, he lost a year. He spent another year trying to play defensive end in a new system, and then he picked it up in his third year. I think with Notre Dame, he has a lot of familiarity with what they wanted to do with him. There's a lot of understanding of what his role is going to be. There's obviously people around him that are going to be able to enable and empower him on like third down pass rushing situations, and there's going to be some different ways they can move those guys around to get them in different spots, different looks, one-on-ones. So I think that this group is probably going to be better overall. It definitely has more potential overall, is I guess what you could say. I'm gonna buy that potential and say they'll be better.
Yeah, I agree. Losing Rubio stings. Heinisch took a lot of heat, but at times he was a really good player, especially when it came to getting after the quarterback from the middle. That was a very valuable thing. I mean, again, that guy had the sack that ended the Georgia game in the college football playoff. So he's a really good player. But exactly. And I think, if Boubacar and Bryce really hit that next level, that's where this entire team could go to a different level because they were, Boubacar was obviously really good last season and he got better as the year went on as he had more time to recover from that ACL injury that he suffered the year before. I had super high expectations for Bryce Young, and it's not like he had a bad year. He didn't. He just didn't live up to the lofty expectations that me and so many others had for him, but that doesn't mean he still can't reach them eventually. So you would think that in his third year in college, with Charlie Partridge coming over, that he could really take his game up a notch. And if he does that and you have Boubacar and Bryce Young on the edge, it doesn't really matter who you have a defensive tackle as long as you have some decent players. And it looks like Notre Dame has that now after the transfer portal. But do you think that this cycle represents a philosophical shift for Notre Dame and how they use the portal, especially with so many underclassmen, or do you think this is just natural evolution?
More the latter. I think Notre Dame has been trying to put themselves in a situation to bring in a class more like this for years, and it's been an ongoing effort. There's been a lot of conversations with administration and with admissions and kind of everything that goes into that about making this happen. I know Coach Freeman directly credited Mickey Kidder and the work that she's done, and then just trying to make sure that they're getting guys in and making sure they're kind of pushing this thing forward. And I think it's a natural evolution. I also think that it kind of lends itself to pressure makes diamonds. Notre Dame, after they missed and they had the stress, they needed to go after underclassmen. It was just the market that was available to them. And for their operational process, admissions and everything else, to be able to accommodate and adjust and make that happen. It speaks to, I think, a real effort by the entire university to try to be more competitive in this space, even if it means making compromises on some of their traditional ways of doing business, right? And that's natural evolution, but it's also like a doubled down sense of belief, right? Like Marcus Freeman had this whole flirtation with the NFL. He's back. He's coming back to Notre Dame at this point. He's announced. And despite the uncomfortable nature of that for fans and everything, like very clearly, Notre Dame is continuing to look at this like, okay, you know what? You're back. We're going to give you everything you need to be successful. We're going to continue to push and invest in you. We're going to invest in making you have the resources you need as a coach and as a program to get to this next level. I think this portal class was really indicative of that sort of concerted effort to empower Marcus and staff.
If we were to rewind to New Year's Day and compare expectations to reality, did Notre Dame exceed, meet, or fall short of what you thought they would do in the transfer portal?
Numbers wise, they about where I thought they would be.
Just in terms of total acquisitions, 8?
Yeah, people were talking like, oh, it's going to be a great class, volume and talent. And I was always like, I don't know about volume. Like, that's just not how they
Yeah,
do
not
business,
enough
right?
guys left.
Yeah, like it's a place for guys like I almost said something I shouldn't, but yeah, no, it's just like it's one of those things where like I never thought they were going to take a bigger volume for this. They definitely hit like as expected there. I think they definitely exceeded expectations with the ability to get undergraduates and kind of build for 27 as well. That well exceeded my expectations. For immediate impact, I don't know exactly where this falls in the scale, but like I do think Nick Marsh is probably a better receiver in 26 than either Porter or Graham. I don't even necessarily think that's controversial. I thought that, they could add a tight end like Foley to the group that would have an immediate impact. So on that side of things, there are a couple places, running back you mentioned as well. Like there's a couple places where I think they could have done more for immediate impact that I expected. Now that could have been, any number of things, decision making on their side. They have confidence in whoever, but for my own personal expectations for like immediate impact, it's probably a little lower. But like I said, I'm kind of couching that with the fact that I just really like Nick Marsh and some of these other guys, like Hollywood Smothers, like you mentioned. Like if they were in this class, my mind, it's like, okay, yeah, that's the immediate impact you're looking for. So I think that's probably one area where you could say maybe they left a little bit of meat on the bone. But even then, like if these guys round out to their potential, they have a healthy offseason, like I'm going to be wrong, which is what you're hoping for. So.
Right. I think if they landed Nick Marsh, everyone would have been happier. And it might seem like we're spending too much time on him, but hey, he was Notre Dame's top target too. It wasn't
He's
just,
so good.
us guys talking on a podcast. The Notre Dame coaching staff really, really wanted him. And unfortunately, they weren't able to. But like you said, like if Porter or Graham even scratched the surface of their potential, they could be really, really good. And then maybe 2 years from now, we're saying, wow, thank God they didn't get Nick Marsh, because then they were able to get Graham and Porter, and those two guys end up being absolute superstars in college. Like that is all certainly possible. So overall, I think I'd probably grade it like an A-, which is still really, really good. It's just not an A+ because they didn't get Marsh or Williams. If they had got those two guys who were their, some of their top targets, those are the guys that they were going after the hardest early on, then it would be an A+. But I think everyone is going to be okay with an A- when you consider all the talent coming back and the fact that they just signed the number 1 high school recruiting class in the country. So they are going to be a very, very good team next year. But before we let you go, you were just down at the opening in Miami as well as Battle 7-on-7. Got to see a lot of really highly rated and sought after recruits across the country. Just take us through what you're able to see this weekend.
Yeah, it was a really great series of events, and I'm grateful that I had a chance to go down there. I saw Julius Jones ball out, saw him make some leaping touchdowns, saw his ability to separate even against a very good 24K Cold Hearts team, which is basically Notre Dame's entire recruiting board, and Trey Taylor at quarterback. That team was sick. And Julius Jones was so good in that game, they forced a tie. His team's really good, though. They also have like Jaden Carey and Zayden Gamble on that team. Really good squad. So I got to see those guys. Quentin Burrell was on that 24K team, so I got to see them play against each other, which was very cool. They both had really good weekends. I got to see a ton of Teddy Gerard, and he was dicing defenses all throughout the course of the weekend. His first 7-on-7 game, he had 4 touchdowns. The first game today that I saw, I had to leave before his second, but the game I saw today, he had 2 touchdowns, and then they kind of were starting to alternate the quarterbacks. A little rain delay kind of cost them, so he didn't get another chance to do more, but he had 2 drives. He led 2 touchdown drives. So I really enjoyed that. There was a number of other targets around that we had a chance to talk to. Cayman Spell was there, so had a chance to catch up with him, although reading the tea leaves, I think that one's trending pretty firmly away from Notre Dame. I got to meet a ton of people, like coaches down there, connect. For recruiting with Notre Dame, there's a lot of interest. Aiden Johnson, the 2028 top 100 safety off the top of my head. He's a guy who he has offers from all over the country, and he was talking about how he wants Notre Dame. People would see me walking around. I had a note or a sticky note on the back of my backpack that had my name, my number, and who I work for, so anyone could see and come talk to me. I had so many recruits, like 4 or 5 stars, and 2028, 2027 walk up like, "Hey man, I got to get that Notre Dame offer. Can you make a call?" It's like, all right, man, that's not my job, but sure. So that was really fun, and it was just a really good event. I would say the real high point was when you watch 7-on-7, because I'm a Northeast guy, I don't see it a lot. Watching 7-on-7, you see a different side of quarterback play than you see in a lot of Fall Fridays, because with no pass rush, there is a lot of processing involved. It's 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and finding your man and kind of evaluating what's going on in the field. And watching Teddy Gerard process through 8-man drops, 7-man drops, 8-man drop equivalent, right? 7-man drops. It was wild. It was so fun. Like, you can see the gears turn in his head, and I was able to stand right behind him and kind of see like the way his feet would shift with his brain and like how he stayed in rhythm. And dude, I don't think I saw him throw an interception. Like, he just 1 to 2 to 3 in, 1 to 2 to 3 throw, 1 2 throw, and like it's just everything's so in rhythm. There's such a clear processing side. And one note that I took was really valuable. I talked to Teddy's 7-on-7 coach, and he told me that the Notre Dame coaches have been in contact, and they told him that Teddy is probably one of the top 2 quarterbacks they've ever seen work the board, just in terms of knowledge and kind of understanding what's happening. And you could see it. Like, even though they're not preparing the same way, it's different. You could see the understanding of, okay, conceptually, this is cover 2. I got a whole shot there. I got to throw now. And he did it. So that was really the biggest thing for me, was seeing that processing in real time and seeing how he was able to dissect, what he's looking at on defense post snap. I was just blown away, man. Like, on Friday nights, it's so hard to see that from high school quarterbacks. There's so much going on, but he's got it. He's got it.
Be sure to check out all of Eric's work over at irishillustrated.com. And now that the college football season is about to end tonight, high school recruiting is set to take center stage once again. And Eric is one of the best in the business in covering recruiting. So we always appreciate the time, man, especially late, very late at night on a Sunday. So get some rest and take care.
I got you, brother. Appreciate you.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day. Before you head out, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. And don't forget to like the video and leave a 5-star rating and review. It really helps the show grow and allows us to have nicer things like this new camera. And by the way, if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. I'll be right back here tomorrow morning. I'll see you then.